right. Welcome one and all to the February 9th Complete Streets Commission meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with Complete Streets Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in the federal, state, and local emergency. Moving on to the roll call, I'd like to introduce Complete Streets Commission members and staff present. I'm Chair Adina Levin. Commissioners present include Brian Altman, Katie Baruzzi, Jackie Sebrian, Sally Cole, J.K. Jensen, Elizabeth King, and Lydia Lee. And let's see, John Cromie is not here yet. So Patrick, will you please provide instructions to the Complete Streets Commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed from here?
Thank you, Chair Levin, members of the Complete Streets Commission. Welcome everyone to the February 9th Complete Streets Commission meeting, and thank you for attending. At this time, we ask that the members of the Commission please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and respond to the members of the Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the Commission. And if you are a member of the public who is also calling in from a landline or cell phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. That includes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair.
All right, thank you very much. And we will move on to item C, reports and announcements, under which staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items. Does staff have any reports and announcements?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So a few announcements and reporting for the Commission's benefit here. So first and foremost, the City Council awarded a construction contract for the Middle Avenue and Nealon Park pedestrian improvement project. So for those of you that might know, this is a project that looks to upgrade the existing pedestrian pathway that's in front of Nealon Park. Also, a couple of improvements, pedestrian improvements that will be part of that scope would be enhancing the existing crosswalk on Middle, at Blake, and also at Summertail. So those are what we call the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. We definitely have a lot of those around the city. Looking forward to having that project get started. We're tentatively looking at maybe a March to April timeframe for the construction to get started, but definitely looking forward to that one. Also, downtown Santa Cruz, as many of you know, we had 2 blocks that were closed, that initially have been closed. For everyone's benefit, the 800 block is now open for vehicular traffic. So this is on Santa Cruz, the south side of Santa Cruz, from Everett to Crane. 600 block will remain closed for the foreseeable future. Staff does anticipate to go back to the City Council in about 6 to 12 months, so with some additional recommendations moving forward. Finally, just for everyone's benefit, if you don't know already, Meta, formerly known as the Facebook, they have recently opened the public park that's in their MP21 campus. So this is the one where along Choco, kind of that bend area where the fire station is. If you go in, now you'll see a park, along with a really nice bridge crossing over the Bayfront Expressway that will lead you to the Bay Trail. Personally was there a couple of days ago. The view up there was spectacular. So if you haven't visited the site yet, definitely highly recommend it. So with that, I will conclude my announcements. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let me see, moving on to public comment, under which the public may address Complete Streets Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agendized issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. And let us see, If anyone in the public wishes to speak, please raise your hand using the Zoom raised hand feature. I am not seeing any public comments. If I don't see any public comments, we'll return it to the agenda. Going back to item E, which is regular business. Under regular business, the commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. The first item of regular business is E1 to approve the minutes for the Complete Street Commission from the January 12th, 2022 regular meeting. Are there any clarification from the commission or edit requests to the minutes? Not hearing any. Let's see, is there any public comment on the minutes from the last agenda? If you're here as a member of the public and want to comment on the minutes from the previous meeting, please raise your hand using the Zoom raised hand feature. I am not seeing any raised hands to make comments on our minutes. Is there a motion and a second with regard to the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I can second that.
All right. So that is, we have a motion and a second. Can staff help us to vote on this matter?
Great, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So for those commissioners that would like to vote affirmative, if you can please raise your hand and just hold it there for a couple of seconds. Great, thank you very much.
All right. So moving on to the substantive item of regular business on E2, and we will receive an update and provide feedback on the Bayfront area pedestrian circulation plan. And Kevin Chen, Chief Senior Transportation Engineer, will introduce this item. So looking forward to this presentation, Kevin.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So just allow me a second here to share my screen. Okay, great. If you can just have a confirmation that you can see my screen, or you can see a presentation full screen.
It just looks black to me, Kevin.
Oh,
It's the started screen sharing, but it does not show any slides yet.
really? Okay, let me redo this real quick. Okay. Are you guys still seeing a black
We
screen?
are still seeing
Yeah.
a started screen sharing message.
Okay. Okay, my apologies.
All right, I'm seeing the screen now, Kevin.
Can you? Awesome. Great, thank you very much. Sorry for that technical difficulty right there. I think I'll have to take partially the blame for that because happening on my computer. Great, thank you very much. Again, Kevin Chen, Senior Transportation Engineer with the City of Menlo Park. Definitely happy to present the item in front of you tonight. So tonight we're looking for the commission to receive an update and also provide feedback on a Bayfront area pedestrian circulation plan that staff has put together. Definitely excited to present this. Okay, great. So for quickly going over tonight's agenda, I'll just briefly go over the background, how we get to where we are today. Then followed by a brief review of the existing and future conditions within the project area that have been identified, what we consider to be the one part of the Bayfront area. Followed by some of the recommendations that staff have put together, and of course, at the end, looking for the commission's feedback on those recommendations. So first things first, how do we get to where we are today? At the September 8th Complete Streets Commission meeting, the idea of putting together a Bayfront area pedestrian circulation plan was introduced as a sub-note to a different project that was being reviewed at the time, giving the area and giving the area circulation and also the fast approaching of projects that might be coming into the pipeline within the next few years. The commission, through your discussion, believe that there is a need and a desire to perhaps look at the area more holistically and further evaluate and look for ways to improve the pedestrian circulation. So as a result of that, at that meeting, the idea of putting one together was conceived. Followed by an October 26th meeting at the City Council, which was the very same project that was deliberated on by the Commission, went to the City Council. And of course, the idea was again presented to the City Council for support. And happy to say that the City Council thought it was a really well-perceived idea that really worth pursuing. And as a result of that, we have the support of the City Council to explore this a little bit further, and also with a direction to return within a little bit over 6 months or so with an update. So fast forward to today, staff was able to look at the condition of the area, taking into account everything that is out there and coming up. And as a result of that, develop a pedestrian plan, which is what we're doing, why we're here tonight in front of you. So here is a diagram, also part of the staff report attachment A. This is a holistic view of the Bayfront area with a few key elements that I want to highlight. First and foremost, you'll see the existing pedestrian and bicycle network along the corridors within this area. Second is taking into account some of the conditions such as developments and circulation elements. So we overlay that with the upcoming projects that have been approved or projects that is currently in our review process, overlay that with the existing network so that way there's a clear image of what's going to happen or what's happening and what will happen within the area. For each of the developments, we also highlighted the Paseo, a public, which is considered to be a public space that each development is anticipating to develop. These paseos are obviously going to be public accessible to the general public, so we wanted to make sure that we highlight those on the graphic as well. Finally, with each development, there will be new driveways going in, so we want to make sure we highlight the driveways as that will inevitably have a consideration needed to be considered when you are looking at pedestrian or bicycle circulation. So this is a graphic that also indicates some of the crosswalks that are available out there and also the bus stops. So really a good graphic that shows really what the existing conditions out there as well as the future developments that this area will see in the near future. I will definitely come back to this graphic. And of course, taking into account everything from a holistic view, the first and foremost that staff evaluated was the pedestrian crossing. After all, this is a pedestrian circulation plan, and this was the guidance that the commission had provided to staff. So looking at the whole area, there are definitely key elements that staff took into account. For example, the crossing, the street blocks As you might have seen from the previous image and even the image that's in front of you, quite a few of the street blocks within the Bayfront area, or this particular area of the Bayfront area, have really long blocks. Some of them, I believe the shortest distance was 1,400 feet, which is quite long considering a street block, which is definitely not the ideal condition from a pedestrian crossing standpoint if we're going from one side of the street to another. And so with that in mind, definitely staff made several recommendations in terms of the approximate location that we are recommending for mid-block crossing, as well as intersection crossing that we see as a necessity in the future. And of course, with any potential housing development projects, the one other thing that we want to look into is transit improvements, and this in terms of the transit stops. So given that this is a pedestrian circulation plan, we thought this would be a good opportunity to look at some of the transit stops and just get a better understanding of where they are and if we can potentially improve them for the future as well. So with that in mind, the next 2 or 3 slides or so will be tackling each element that I identified a little bit earlier. And of course, with the ultimate goal of getting some feedback from the commission. So as I mentioned, each slide, there'll be a specific topic that I want to address. With the first slide being simply the question of pedestrian crossing locations. As you can see, there are some recommended mid-block crossings that staff is proposing. So for instance, at the on Constitution between Marsh and Chrysler, staff is recommending 2 mid-block crossings. I do want to emphasize that by no means are these the final locations. The locations are generally picked based on the land uses around the area, the ease of access to those paseos, and of course, taking into account some of the potential driveway conflicts that these developments will introduce. But again, so I don't want to come across as in no consideration is taking place. Definitely some thoughts went into that, but by no means are they meant to be the final location. So as you can see, staff is recommending approximately 6 mid-block crossings with 2 intersection crossings as well. One is located at Constitution and Jefferson, and then the other one is located at Chrysler and Jefferson. Okay, so then the next topic of discussion here that we're looking for feedback from the commission would be if any of the mid-block crossings would be beneficial to have enhancements. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, some of the blocks that we're evaluating are quite long, and as a result of that, they are potential candidates for some speeding that could potentially be going on. And as a result of that, staff is looking for an opportunity to really enhance the traffic calming aspect of the streets as well. And with the recommendation of mid-block crossings, this is definitely a good candidate to also be to enhance the street from a traffic calming standpoint. So as a result of that, staff is put together 3 potential recommendations to enhance those mid-block crossings. Each of their advantages and disadvantages are identified in the staff report as well as in front of you. The images below are the sort of your typical cross sections for each of the improvements. Of course, with the flashing beacon, I think being sort of the most familiar by all of you, just given that we have quite a few locations within the city that have the flashing beacons. Traditionally, a raised crosswalk is another great way to not only enhance a crosswalk, but also serve as traffic calming. So the bottom 2 images that you see are 2 of the more typical designs of the crosswalks. And the reason why you have 2 here with the traditional and the simplified, generally speaking, the content of the crosswalk itself is very much similar. The only difference is where that crosswalk sort of ends. So with the raised crosswalk, you can see that the entire crosswalk is flat with the sidewalks on both sides. So if you're walking from one side of the street to the other, you are essentially walking at a level plane. Versus the simplified version here, you can see that the raised crosswalk dips down as you get towards the sidewalk, eventually conforming or matching the gutter point. And this is a design that typically is implemented when you have a really constrained drainage problem. So for example, if the existing drainage system doesn't really allow you to have a traditional raised crosswalk, then we typically explore this simplified version as a means of getting a raised crosswalk without needing to excessively improve the drainage system that's out there. So certainly each of their own have their advantages and disadvantages in terms of traffic calming. I think it's fairly evident that a raised crosswalk obviously would be able to slow down cars a little bit better than a rectangular flashing beacon, because with the beacons, they are not activated unless there's a person there. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, in addition to crosswalks, we're also looking for some feedback on transit stops. The Bayfront area currently is served by 7 stops from our M3 Marsh Road Transit. There are currently no Samtran buses that runs within the Bayfront area. There are some services that runs along the perimeter, existing and proposed. However, given that there are definitely a ton of potential to serve residents within the Bayfront area, staff is having a continuous conversation with Samtrans about opportunities to have services come into the Bayfront area. So as a result of that, we wanted to make sure that we address the layout of a transit stop ahead of time. And here is essentially 2 images with two different designs when it comes to a transit stop. The one to your left is what we consider to be sort of your traditional non-pole out bus layout. You see that everywhere across the city. It is kind of the existing condition out there. As I mentioned, we have 7 stops, transit shuttle stops right now within the Bayfront area. They are all with similar design layouts. The other potential layout that we could have is what we call pole out, which is the image to your lower right corner here. As you can see, what happens is that the curb or the sidewalk behind the curb essentially meanders into your private properties, essentially creating a dedicated space just for the transit stop. Obviously, I think the very first obvious benefit here would be that the bus is completely out of either the travel lane, or if you have a bike lane, out of the bike lane. So it's got its own dedicated space. However, you do have to meander the sidewalk to accommodate that pole out, which is not ideal from if you are a blind person or having difficulty navigating the sidewalk. So those are 2 potential design options that staff is looking for the commission's feedback tonight, moving forward. So of course, with everything else, there's always a next step. So the next step for this particular effort right here, tonight being the very first step, which is getting the feedback from the commission on those elements that I've just mentioned. After tonight, staff will go back to the drawing board to incorporate any feedbacks that we might get tonight, incorporate that into a draft final recommendation, which then will be presented to the city council. And with the city council's blessing, we'll then look for opportunities to implement the recommendations. As I do want to mention that this is definitely not something that can be implemented overnight. What we're looking for here tonight is really your feedback on design elements, locations of those proposed crosswalks. And then once we have that opportunity, we'll make sure to implement them accordingly. So I would consider this to be somewhat of a long range plan rather than something that can be implemented overnight. So with that, I will thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Great. So first of all, thanks so much to staff for coming forward with this, and glad to see that the city council picked up on the recommendation, and then the staff has worked on this general topic. So really glad to be able to give the feedback at this point. And first want to take questions from commissioners, and then after taking questions from commissioners, we'll take comments from any members of the public, and then back to the commission for discussion. And is staff looking for any motions or just commentary from us at this point today?
That's a great question, Madam Chair. I think today we're looking for commentary. We're looking for any feedback. Of course, at the end of the conversation, if there's anything that's from our perspective requires a vote, then obviously we'll proceed as such. But the starting point is getting feedback from the commission.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And Commissioner Bursey.
Yeah, I had one question for staff for now, and that was these community amenities that you see on table 1 of the staff report, the community serving retail with 111 Independence, the childcare with Menlo Portal, the urgent care center with Menlo Uptown. I feel like I don't know if those are still part of the plan, but if they are, I kind of want to envision like where the access points are for those, because I think that might make that sort of changes how we think about circulation, doesn't it? A little bit. Do you know, Kevin, if those are still, I also feel like those have been a little bit like shifty, like not, I mean, like we haven't, I know that they were being discussed and I don't remember where we are on those plans.
Right, yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think in terms of the first, the line items where the projects have been approved, I think that's definitely, and that includes Menlo Uptown, the urgent care center. I think to this point, staff believes that those are the amenities that will go into those land uses. And I definitely share the same sentiment as well. So when staff looking at some of the locations, they definitely have, we definitely took into account some of the amenities. So for example, in the location where the Menlo Uptown, so this is the one that's between Chrysler and Choco, that crosswalk, that mid-block crosswalk being proposed there is very close to where the urgent care will be. So definitely take that into consideration when we select these locations.
And Commissioner Bruzy, is your hand still up? And if not, then Commissioner Lee has a hand.
Yeah, tagging along to Katie's question, I noticed that some of the crosswalks are aligned with the Paseos, but not always. And I'm wondering if there was a particular reason for not aligning them in cases where they're not aligned. Did it have something to do with just purely trying to split the distance in so that along those blocks so that there was a crosswalk, they were spaced out a little bit differently? Because I think, looking at the situation on the ground and how everything's going to be so new, it made me think a little bit about Stanford campus and how, things are aligned there because they're master planned, right? And so it struck me as a way of the crosswalks of kind of bringing this sense of cohesion to that area by lining things up.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Lee. That's another great question and great observation there. When we look into the proposed locations, definitely first and foremost was try to align with the sales. When that is not possible, there's generally we would try to look for an alternative location that would make sense to of course align with the sale. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, with the one that's in front of Menlo Uptown, we try to make sure that it's more closer to the amenity, given that there's more likely people crossing there. For example, the one in front of Menlo Portal on Constitution, the reason why it didn't align with the Paseo directly is because it's facing a driveway. So obviously we don't want to have a crosswalk going into the driveway. But generally speaking, and to the one that's on Jefferson, that is not across the Tide Academy, but more closer to where the bend is, that's where that particular crosswalk has been in the works for a while now, and is the one that will be serving a healthcare center, the Metis Healthcare Center there as well. So that one's been in the work for a while. So generally, we try to align the Paseo whenever possible.
So just another question, which is maybe more tactical, but you had asked for different feedback on the different types of crosswalks. I'm wondering, given the changing landscape here, whether it makes, at this stage, it makes more sense to think of maybe like temporary paint and to pilot the locations and see how they, you know, work with the actual traffic and you know, pedestrian traffic there before like building something that is more permanent. Is that an option that you guys considered at all?
Yeah, so that's a great feedback that we'll take down and take that into consideration. I will say that looking at this, the way I see this plan, again, a little bit when I was mentioning a little bit earlier, not long range is probably not the right word, but for lack of a better word right now, I'll use long range. One of the things that staff is considering is when and how that we can implement this locations when if they get approved ultimately. And so one of the things that we will consider is obviously the timeline of the developments, whether or not that lines up. The other thing that we want to consider is making sure that we don't put a crosswalk, for example, that goes to nowhere. So we want to make sure that, you know, we align that particular crosswalk with a future development, and that they can better enhance the experience of a pedestrian right there. But we certainly will take that into consideration. And if there's a need for us to quote unquote pilot a crosswalk, that's certainly an option for us.
Great. I have some feedback on individual crosswalk locations, but I'll leave that for the discussion round.
All right, I have a couple of questions, but if fellow commissioners want to ask questions before me, please do raise your hand with questions. And Commissioner Subian, you had a hand raised earlier, so if you have questions additionally now, feel free to ask them.
I'm not sure what falls between a question and just part of the discussion, since partly it doesn't seem like we're really taking action. So I had some things, but I'm fine waiting till we discuss it too. I don't know what the difference between the two parts are.
Okay, so well, we can hold comments for discussion. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will ask a couple of questions. And so when are the various different known new developments expected to be built and occupied?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I have necessarily the most satisfactory answer for you. With respect to projects that have been approved, my understanding, so for in this case, the Menlo Portal project, to some extent the Menlo Uptown project, the on-site construction have definitely began. My understanding is that there are still some permitting process that needs to go through, and with the understanding that those have not been quite approved yet. So if I really have to venture a guess, I would say at least for those projects, we are probably still at a minimum, maybe, actually, sorry, I'll take it back. I don't want to venture a guess, to be honest, because I just don't have enough information to even give you a good education.
But like if something is starting to be built, it's probably like less than 10 years and more than 3 months, and any more like broad ranges are still welcome.
Right. So for the approved projects, I would definitely comfortable say they probably won't be completely built at least for another 3 to 6 months or so, just giving their permitting process. Of course, for the approved projects, definitely should be there within a 5-year range. Can't really say the same thing about the pending projects, given that they're still under the review process, which means they haven't been approved by the City Council or the Planning Commission yet. So very much different.
Okay, and then one more question, which is, can you zoom in and talk about the improvements, pedestrian and possibly transit, that would pertain to the school? I know that the school has expressed, questions and concerns about the, transportation and safety for the kids. So can you zoom in on that location and talk about how the proposed features would affect the school?
Yeah, definitely. Let me try to zoom in. We'll get blurry as I zoom in. So I think just for everyone's benefit, the chair is mentioning right now is the improvement around Thai Academy. So as you can see, there is currently a shuttle stop serving the academy. One of the locations being proposed is a mid-block crosswalk here, which would directly connect the uptown Paseo to the Thai Academy. Of course, being sort of a plan level at this point, certainly that something to answer your question, I think would require us to kind of dive into sort of the next step, if you will, which is looking into the design. So what I can do, what staff can do is take your point into consideration and make sure that whenever the opportunity comes, that we'll look at the circulation around the Thai Academy and reaching out to the Thai Academy to make sure that the proper stakeholders are brought to the table.
Okay, and then with that statement, you have answered the question I was going to ask about when the outreach to the school would be. So that is good. And I think that those are actually I had one more question. And so in terms of the locations where the bus stops would go, would any of them be used for the private shuttles in addition to public buses, or are the private shuttles, do they have other homes?
Right. That's another great question. I believe at this moment in time, it's hard to provide, I think, a clear answer to that question. I think from staff's perspective, we wanted to make sure that we, first and foremost, that those shuttle stops are at the ideal location where they should be. Of course, the second question then becomes, would they be a shared shuttle stop between public and private entities? I think right now, some of the shuttle stops out there definitely are being used by both public and private entities. So I certainly do not see a reason why that would change in the future. But of course, I certainly don't want to be definitive about that as well. So if the chair or any other commissioners have a feedback about that, staff is certainly welcome to receive that and take that into consideration for the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll get to that when we get to the discussion. And I see that Commissioner Cole, who hasn't spoken yet, has a hand.
Thank you, Chair Levin. I have a quick question, Kevin, about the turnouts. When you were describing how the advantages of the one that was shown in the photo that, there we go, on the bottom right, that was unfortunately had to take a little bit away the sidewalk, and you said one of the disadvantages is, if you're blind or have another disability of some kind, might be hard to navigate. I'm just wondering if there's any similar situations in the city where we've done these, and how have we accommodated people who might be sight impaired with this type of treatment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. Generally speaking, we actually have not heard any sort of negative feedback in terms of a particular individual that cannot navigate this sidewalk. I think I was simply pointing it out that, because I do have conversations with a few of our residents here, one particular resident here that is sight impaired, and he has expressed to me in the past that when a sidewalk is not straight, it's a little bit harder for them to navigate. Not to the point that they cannot navigate, it's just that it's not ideal.
It's not the ideal. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And Commissioner Brucey?
Sorry, I have the world's slowest mouse. So like navigating over to unmute myself is really painful. I'm sure it's Apple's fault, Commissioner Cole. I had a weird question about Menlo Uptown because I was looking back at a thing we looked at, like a loading zone that we looked at a few months ago, and a schematic, and it kind of looked like it was going to be on both sides of Constitution from the schematic, but that's not what I'm seeing on your diagram, and I was wondering about that.
Right. So you're correct that a few meetings ago there was an item that came to the commission asking for cutouts.
Passenger loading zone in front of building B.
Exactly. Yeah. So those cutouts currently they are not reflected on this graphic because we're still going through sort of the design and the approval process. So we want to so the locations are not quite exactly where they are yet. They're still going through the review process, but so there will be one cutout for the Menlo Uptown location project.
Beyond the cutout, which is that on this diagram that we got from them, I don't know when it was, October or something. It sure looks like it's going to be on both sides of Constitution. In other words, so when Lydia and I were biking along Constitution yesterday, I guess it was, we were noticing that there were no sidewalks on the bay side of Constitution at all. So we were like, these would in fact be the crosswalks to nowhere, right? Like there's no developments here yet. But if this development is going to span both sides of the street, then that makes more sense. And I think I was just a little confused by that. And it's not necessarily reflected in your diagram here.
Yeah, my understanding is that they will only be cut out on the project side.
Not the cutout, but the buildings themselves.
The buildings themselves.
Yeah, it sort of looked in this one diagram like the project was going to be the street was going to bifurcate the project. Yeah.
That's not my.
Okay, all right, cool. All right, so it's just a weird diagram then that I'm looking at.
Right.
No worries.
Yeah.
And
Perhaps
sorry for
we can reconvene offline. Just
not a big deal. I was sort of excited. Maybe there would be sidewalks on that side of the street too. Anyway, that's all.
Understood.
Yeah. Thanks.
And do I understand correctly that when there are, it's just standard is to have sidewalks, and so if there's an area that doesn't have development and doesn't have a sidewalk, but it gets development, it'll get a sidewalk? Do I understand this correctly?
Generally speaking, yes. There's a few criteria that triggers it, but generally speaking, yes.
Okay. So I do not see any other questions from fellow commissioners. So last call for clarifying questions, and then we'll see if there's any comments from members of the public. Are there any members of the public who have a comment on this item? If so, please raise your hand to speak, and you'll have 3 minutes for a comment. I am not seeing any members of the public with their hands raised using the Zoom hand raise feature, and if I don't see any more any comments from members of the public in a second, then I will bring this back to the commission for discussion and recommendations, and would like a little staff help in terms of guiding the conversation. Do you want to start with some of the questions that you had for us so that we can go through the questions that you had, and then any other comments that we may have that are related to the topic at hand?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think as I mentioned, as the staff report illustrated, and I don't, there are certainly different elements that staff is looking for feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe just go ahead and share my screen again. Hopefully I won't have the technical difficulty that I had the first time. Okay. I can just have a confirmation. Great, thank you. I think I'm seeing some heads shaking. So definitely looking for quite a few feedback from the commission tonight. So I'm just going to briefly go over them one more time. First and foremost, just looking for feedback on the number of locations here. So as I mentioned, we have mid-block crossing. We also have a couple of intersection crossings that we're recommending. So the first feedback that we're looking for is just simply the number of locations and also kind of their general location. Again, not necessarily tied to where they are pinpoint exactly, but simply the approximate location. So that would be first and foremost. And then if you have any interest in the improvement to those mid-block crossings, again, from a staff perspective, we're coming from also not just enhancing the crosswalk, but an opportunity for traffic calming. So if the commission has a particular desire, for instance, if you prefer to see raised crosswalk versus flashing beacon, certainly want to take those comments from you. And of course, and then when it comes to the transit stops, recognizing that even though we have 7 stops out there right now, they may or may not be the final location once we have more services into the Bayfront area. So what we're looking for tonight is simply your preference on a transit stop layout. So in other words, if you have a preferred design on how you would like to see the transit stop be designed in the future, those would be the type of feedback that we're looking for. So if the chair is amenable to my suggestion, I would suggest that we go through each of the slides and have let each commissioner have an opportunity to provide their feedback.
All right, that sounds great. And then at the end, we should do a sweep of, does anybody have any other comments that is related to the general topic, but was not covered on one of the slides. So I see that Commissioner Seabrand has a hand.
I do. Is it time now for comments?
It
Yes.
is now time for comments on the pedestrian crossing locations, the things that are on
Excellent.
this slide. Yeah.
I totally agree with Lydia and Kevin and whoever else said that when they can be aligned with the Paseos, that seems to make the most sense to me. I was thinking that in terms of raised sidewalks, I prefer the ones that have the lower, like so that bikes can roll over them. I prefer the ones that are modified. And also I would say that being the closest to the bay, that drainage may not be a thing now, but it might be a thing in the future that will need to be dealt with. And then I think we should have lights in some spots and raised crosswalks in other spots. And I'm not really sure whether the raised crosswalks should be the ones like sort of closer to the intersection where you're sort of slowing people down at the start, or whether you really want lights at that crosswalk closer to the intersections, even though they're in mid-block, because people are going to be coming around corners and you really want them to be able to see it. So like, but I would really like lighted crosswalks where we think that there's the highest impact of cars not noticing people, like, and then raised crosswalks at really long thoroughfares of nothingness, at those long stretches in between. And then I think those are really, and I like the pullouts again because the bike thing. Like it seems like there's going to be a lot of shuttle service there, and so those roadways are pretty wide. I feel like they can accommodate pullouts for the shuttles so that they don't impact the bike traffic quite to the same extent. And like I think that's all of the things I have for now. I'm sure I have more in a minute.
Cool. Thank you. Commissioner Lee.
Right. If we go back to the intersection, the crosswalks, map, great. I have some feedback specifically at the intersections, because I feel like these are where those turning motions by cars make me a little nervous. When Katie and I were out there yesterday, we ran into people who were crossing Constitution, and they actually preferred not to cross at the turn there to Jefferson, from Constitution onto Jefferson, because they said basically the flow of traffic currently is such that people make lefts onto Jefferson from Constitution. And so there's just a lot of traffic in that area, and they didn't want to cross there. So they preferred crossing away from that intersection. And also, with an eye to bicyclists, the crosswalk right now is just on the south side. And so if you're a bicyclist and you're trying to make a left, which is what the official route to Tide it calls for people to do, they have to come down Choco, make a left onto Constitution, then make another left onto Jefferson. If you are nervous about taking the lane and you want to be a pedestrian, you don't have a crosswalk to help you over that intersection, right? And if that's a busy intersection, you may feel more comfortable walking your bike across, right? So it seems strange if the main route, if the main direction that those students are coming along, again, this is the official way, you would want to have crosswalks on both sides and not just on the south side. You want to, I guess, south, north, I don't know, whatever direction that you want to have both sides of the intersection. So that's my feedback on that one. If you're going to have a crosswalk there, right? Because I guess the other issue is if there are no sidewalks planned for the other side, then you do have sort of a crosswalk to nowhere, right? So that's just a little bit of a strange crosswalk right now from pedestrian. It doesn't really serve the bicyclists, and it doesn't really seem to serve the pedestrians either to have that one there. I would love to hear more thinking about what's going on there. And then really, should I go ahead and talk about the other intersection, or should I stop there, Kevin?
Yeah, please.
You want me to keep going? Okay, so then the other intersection, which is at Jefferson and Chrysler. Interestingly, that is not a controlled stop. So we noticed cars coming down Chrysler pretty quickly because there was no stop. And so again, sort of just having crosswalk on one side of the intersection, may not be in the future, right? Like whatever's going on developmental wise, you probably want to allow for pedestrians on either side. And I think because there's it's an anomaly for that area, because everywhere else there's either lights or stop signs. It feels a little bit, anytime there's something different, I think that always like increases the potential for accidents, right? Like, I think people like consistency. They want stop signs consistently, or they don't want stop signs, right, at all. It's like this on and off can lead to confusion for people. So I don't know whether the traffic at that intersection currently justifies a stop sign, but I think if we are telling people that we're going to have a crosswalk there, then we may need to think about putting in further protections. So that's my main feedback on the crosswalk situation. And I think what Jackie said about the other two topics sounds great. I think one question I had was whether a public transit stop can also function as a Lyft Uber drop-off, because that was something, we discussed that on the Independence project and how they wanted to make sure they had, loading and unloading also for shuttles and other kind of traffic. And I'm just thinking, is there a way to double up on those pullouts?
Okay, great. So I will try to respond to all of them, but definitely let me know if I miss anything. To the point about doubling the pullouts as a function of shuttle stops as well as Uber, Lyft, or other functions, I think that's currently a dialogue that will be ongoing for a little bit of time with Samtrans. As I mentioned before, currently there's no Samtrans services within the area, but of course, given with the eye towards the future, we do expect some services eventually, or hopefully some services eventually. So that'll definitely be an ongoing conversation that we'll be having with Samtrans as well. To your points about the intersection crosswalks, definitely recognize that the need for crossings on both sides if the opportunity arises. So we'll definitely take that into consideration. For your question about crossing into sort of crossing to nowhere, that's certainly one of the challenges that we have right now, given that some of the parcels are, we have developed parcels that have been being redeveloped, which obviously would have a nice sidewalk, nice amenities, but of course on the other side, maybe there aren't any. So that's one of the reasons why we'll wait for the opportunity to see when a crosswalk is appropriate. And lastly, to the question about Chrysler and Jefferson, I do want to point out that, so what's in front of you, you see the 123 Independence project. That happens to be one of the driveway accessed. The project currently is in the under the review process. So part of the review will be the preparations of an EIR and a traffic study. So that will be one of the key elements that staff will be reviewing once the time comes. So we'll be able to know what kind of control, if any, will be most appropriate at that location given the project.
Great, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Cole.
Yes, first I like Commissioner Lee, I agreed with Jackie's comments around the attributes that I think would drive the design decisions about the crosswalks, and also her comment about the pullouts being a favorable option. So I agree with that. And also I just wanted to thank Commissioners Lee and Baruzzi because their work to go over there in person, required their time. And I think their insights have been incredibly helpful to bring this to life for me. So thank you. I just had two small things. One was in the, the crosswalk that's it's on Constitution between Chrysler and whatever the Independence. So that little yellow one about nope. I was controlling that. So the little yellow one right there between the two driveways. Yeah. So I might be mistaken, but living on Santa Cruz, I obviously see people and their behavior coming out of driveways all the time. And there's a lot of looking one way, like looking toward the traffic coming at you and just turning without actually looking. Let's say you're turning right, you look to the left to see if you can do it, but you're never really looking right to see if there's sort of a pedestrian, coming. And so I was just like, is that a good place for a crosswalk between two driveways like that? Since people tend to kind of accelerate out of driveways and just sort of go. And maybe their behavior wouldn't be that, oh, the first thing I'm going to do when I leave this driveway is actually come to a stop, like at a crosswalk. So that was one thing that I wasn't sure about, that I thought I would raise. The other thing, Commissioner Lee, is I might be remembering this wrong, but I think when we originally talked about this section, this map and this part of town, I thought you had some comments about the building there that was on the corner of Constitution and Independence. And I thought it was some comments maybe around the pullouts there or something around the crosswalk there. Is that correct? Do you remember that at all? Maybe I'm not remembering it right.
Yeah, I do remember. I think my concern about it was like having things too close to intersections, and it was just, can you pull back away? Because the more things that are going on the intersection, the more confusion is like to rise. So just trying to separate out like all the possible interactions as much as possible.
Yeah.
That was one thing that Katie and I were talking about that, the intersection that's kind of close to the bend there at Jefferson, we would want a situation where the car comes right around the bend and instantly is confronted with a, crosswalk kind of situation. And again, I know Kevin, I've reiterated how you're not exactly sure where everything's going to be. And if this one's already been designed and people are comfortable with, the site distances, because I know that that's what you guys do as professional planners, right? Is you have to take into those sight lines into account. So, if that's been considered, then, I'm not concerned.
Well, I think it's good to call out that those are the kinds of issues that arise and that we're interested in them and getting them sorted out properly. And I did think that when you talked about that corner there, the Jefferson Constitution, excuse me, Independence Constitution corner, I do remember now you said it, that it was an issue around a lot of congestion and activity in that intersection. So I think it's good to just raise to the staff again that that would be something to make sure is sorted and that the different functions aren't colliding. That's it.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Brucey.
Yay. Okay. All right. Going to try not to be redundant here. I echo a lot of what people have said. There were a few things I wanted to add that we noticed. One was there was the Lydia and I did a sort of impromptu interview of some people who were crossing the street, the Constitution Drive, actually approximately at the place where that Paseo bumps out, a little bit before then, but like so not the one in the middle of the proposed development, but the one over by the badminton area. It was sort of anyway. So they were. One thing they noted was that there is no light. The area gets really dark at night, and low there was like one solitary street light. And it is really, I mean, I remember when people vaguely, when this whole plan for the M2 was being created, that it was supposed to be this whole live, work, play, like not just people showing up at 9 and leaving at 5 and then it being sort of desolate and deserted, but it was going to be like a really vibrant feeling place. So just encourage, I don't know, insofar as the public right of way is within our control, I think, adding things like lighting and plants and things, just like whatever you can do to make it feel a little bit less concrete. And people were just hurtling down Constitution on that block, the one between, there's just a really long phase where there's just nothing to slow them down. So yay for raised crosswalks. I feel like I see that our, we might, anyway, I'm sure if our district will have things to say about that, but I just, there's sort of preventative public safety and then there's responsive public safety. And I want to make sure that we're balancing those two needs. So let's not create more public safety issues. So there was that. Then the other thing I wanted to say was, so in this space, I'm particularly concerned about the curves where there's not a lot of protection for people and cars can go around kind of fast. So one is over by 111 Independence and the other one where there's just like nothing, right? I don't think we have any complete street seat type stuff over in this purple area in this corner of where went by 111 Independence. And I don't know what that's going to be like for people who are using that space. And I just want to call out that like, it's probably fine because there's nothing on the other side, but I hope that, I hope we're careful there. But then the other place was all the way back on the other side. Thanks for scrolling with me. There's a Paseo connecting Choco and Jefferson that's proposed, which looks like it would be, right there, which looks on the one hand like a really nice way for kids coming to and from Tide or people coming from some of these new housing places who want to maybe get into spaces in Bellhaven or access the Ringwood Bike Bridge. That's like a nice shortcut for them. On the other hand, it pops out right at this weird apex of a turn where there's a shuttle stop and some other stuff. And I just hope that staff are being extra conscious about what we can do there. You didn't put a crosswalk there in the corner, but if kids are popping out of there on bikes in the morning, which they might well be, that seems kind of scary. And so I really want to hope that we don't, and we should never just assume that if we tell kids they're not going to do something, they're going to take a longer, more circuitous path, that's what they're going to do. They're definitely going to go the fastest way, like the most direct way. And so we just need to anticipate that and plan for it and make sure that, we can do whatever we can to increase visibility, lighting, whatever, big red flags, mirrors. So that was something. And then that might have been it. Oh no, I was going to tell you again, so that for the benefit of everybody else who can hear, including attendees, that another thing that Lydia and I noticed was when we were biking, so we came down Constitution Ave and we went all the way to the place where Constitution stops being two-way, where the road just sort of ends. And as we were approaching this area, we noticed a driver pulling a U-turn. And there was a security guard sitting in front of the building. So I said, "Hi, security guard, do you see this a lot?" And she's like, "Oh yeah." all the time. So there are drivers who are coming down Constitution into the place where they can't turn around, and because they're not like us, where we're like nice people on bikes being like, hi, can we just come through your development and go back the other way? Like they had to pull U-turn, or they did. So that doesn't seem like a super safe thing. And I'm wondering how we're gonna figure out how to keep that from happening. So I believe, especially with rideshare drivers, this problem isn't gonna go away. In fact, if anything, with lots of employees and housing, it could increase. So I just wanted to flag that for everybody and say, I don't know how you solve the problem, but we should probably figure it out.
And I would I would love to hear from staff about the U-turn question. Can we put that at the back of the queue and take comments on all the things that are on the slides, and then put the U-turn as something to get to before we are done? All right.
Oh wait, can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, now lest I forget later, I wanted to appreciate staff for doing this, because we asked for it a couple of months ago, and I know staff have a lot going on, and it's like super awesome to see such great response. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. So moving on to Commissioner Sebrian. And I'll put myself in the stack somewhere, but Commissioner Sebrian?
Thanks. So like, yes to all the things that everybody else has brought up. And thank you so much for like your careful observations of things. It's awesome. A couple of things that I am pondering. So I see that it's nicely set up for like the crosswalk to sort of like enable kids to get to Tide. But Tide is not a school that all those kids are going to go to, right? It's not a regular funneled high school. And so I wonder, as we are dealing with our shuttle system, it's great that we have a way for these kids, should they get into Tide, to go to Tide. But like, are we going to introduce, is our school buses going to come? Are the shuttle buses going to drop at other high schools, or is Tide the only place they're going to drop? Like, that's just a question I have. And I think it's a Ravenswood school district, so those kids would be zoned to get to Ravenswood, which then is another bus that's going to be picking up through that region as well. So just like the multiple bus routes of kids going to multiple districts of schools outside of this is one of my concerns. And it's only loosely related, but way down at Choco and Constitution, I'm wondering why, like, can we just add in a fourth crosswalk there? Because it looks like there's going to be a hotel. And so right where the hotel is, should you want to go from the hotel to any of the amenities that aren't Facebook, you have to like walk across the street and then walk across the street to get there. So I'm just thinking, like, can't we just add a fourth crosswalk? Yeah, I think that was all the things I wrote down for now.
All right, cool. So if there aren't any other commissioners that have a hand, I'm gonna express thoughts about the different questions that staff has asked, or staff has posed to us. I wanna echo and reinforce what several people have said, in that in locations where it would be logical to have a multi-legged crosswalk, it would be good to do that, you know, kind of from the start, as this area, as the pedestrian amenities are further built out. We have the benefit that it's not 1984 or whatever, when the standard was to do one-legged crosswalks, so that, you know, so as not to disturb drivers from going fast near pedestrians. And so I think that just like having that as a standard, and assuming that any place that there's going to be people walking, that we don't want to have people, you know, zigzag around the street to be able to cross the street in some place where there will be pedestrians. I have a question about the let's see. With regard to the Sobrato development and the location of the driveway, if that development has not yet been approved, and if there is any logical choice in the matter, is that a reasonable place for a driveway with regard to that T? Is that a good place or a bad place for a driveway at that T intersection? Can staff comment upon that location of a driveway?
Yeah, definitely. So I think relative to the project, I think the project in of itself is expecting to have access along Chrysler. And so given sort of the configuration of Chrysler relative to everything else, staff believes that this would be likely a more ideal location for that driveway, because then what we create is more of a standard intersection, if you will, rather than having some sort of an offset intersection.
Mhm.
Furthermore, we can look into potentially putting in some type of control at the location as well.
Mhm. Okay, great. Thank you very much for answering that question.
Yeah, and just so you know, the driveways are not to scale. Obviously, they're just
Yeah.
enlarged for visibility purposes.
Yes, those are red blobs. I do appreciate. I also really want to appreciate and thank staff for having this diagram to have colors and color codes, which I don't know about anybody else on the commission or members of the public, but I find it essentially a million times more easy to understand than the usual, like, more architecture engineering diagrams with really narrow lines and opaque terminology. So I wanted to really thank whoever it is that put in the time and effort to illustrate it and design it in a way that commissioners and other members of the public can understand. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to Patrick. Patrick actually is the one created the graphics, so all credit to him.
All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's see what else. In terms of the, I want to agree with fellow commissioners' comments about the pullouts and bikes, especially as they relate to having the commute shuttles that tend to be, like, quite peaky. And, even in a post-pandemic era where the peak might not be as peaky, it'll still be peaky. And, being able to continue to bicycle safely when there are the commute shuttles is going to be helpful. So I would support that. In addition to, since that will cause a little bit of a jog in the sideways, to think about how to do this in a way that would be the least concerning to people with visual and mobility challenges. But like the pullouts to provide the bike safety, it seems like an important thing. Let's see what else. In terms of the mid-block crosswalks, can you go back to that slide for the mid-block crosswalks? The focus on having the raised crosswalks where there might be straightaways that would tempt speeding in this location seems extremely important, because there are going to be times that this area is less busy, and at that time it's going to be very tempting to drivers to speed while it's a mixed use area where there's still going to be some people about. So any place that looks like it would tempt speeding, I would strongly encourage the raised crosswalks, and would look to staff to use professional judgment as to where it's really important to have the stormwater drainage limitation considered, and like where that's not an issue, to have it be someplace that's the less impactful to bicyclists, because this is an area where if you're there, like there are other amenities that people will want to get to that are a reasonable biking distance, that's like a little bit too far to walk, but where you would want to, if Willow Village is approved and people want to go over to Willow Village, or people want to go out to the Bay Trail or something, there's going to be a variety of different things of interest that are within bicycling distance, and maintaining safe bicycling here will be helpful for people to get around with less cars and less driving. And I think those were the comments that I had. Do any other commissioners have comments before we go back to the U-turn issue? I'm not seeing any. And so we'd like to go and hear from staff on the U-turn issue. And then before we're done, would love to hear staff basically summarize what they had heard to make sure that we recognize what staff has captured.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
U-turns. What do we do about the U-turns?
Yes. So yeah, thank you very much for Commissioner Baruzzi for boots on the ground and asking questions from the security guard. So this is an issue that will at this moment in time, I don't have an answer for the commission at this point, but we have taken note of that, and we'll definitely look into it and hopefully come up with a satisfying solution.
Okay, great. So is this going to, did you mention that this was going to come back to us after there's been more integration of staff in more detailed design? Did I remember that correctly, which I might not have?
Right. So once we incorporate all the comments that we have received tonight from the commission, the goal is to go back to the city council because the city council had requested a check-in from staff. So that's our anticipated next step, is to go to the city council.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds good. I remember that I had one more comment, which is with regard to the public and private buses and shuttles, is that personally, I know that there are people in the world who, don't like private buses and want to make it difficult for those vehicles. Personally, I think that anything that is helping people travel in a bus and not travel in a personal car, creating more congestion and pollution, is a good. So I think that where it seems reasonable to share the infrastructure in a way that does not get in the way of a public bus, I think is good. Would want to, check in with Samtrans to make sure that whatever the sharing is continuing to enable our public buses to travel on schedule. And then I would have possibly greater concern about the Lyfts and Ubers and deliveries, and would really want to check with Samtrans to make sure that in anything that is used for sharing, that it's not anticipated to cause reliability problems or safety problems for the public transportation. And so those are the thoughts that I have on that topic. Commissioner Seabrian?
I had one more thing to just I don't know where it's captured in, but in terms of how we structure the crosswalks along in front of Tide, is that Tide doesn't currently have any seniors, but it will, which means that our traffic won't capture seniors trying to drive in this mess also, but next year and all the years after it will. So that's just an additional layer of traffic to consider, and the kind of drivers that we'll be dealing with at that uncontrolled intersection at the end of Jefferson and Chrysler. Anyway.
All right, good. And thanks to whoever it is who raised the question. So in addition to the driving high school seniors who hopefully will have good transit alternatives and have less driving, but planning for people who live here going to school and taking buses is another good thing for staff to be considering in the transit needs for the area. Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners before we ask staff to summarize and review back on what they have heard? Seeing no hands. Kevin and team, can you recap what you have heard so we can confirm that that reflects what we've said?
Yes, absolutely. So first, thank you everyone to the commission for providing the feedback. I think definitely got a lot of good valuable feedbacks here that we can take back and incorporate them into and consider them for the future when the time is appropriate. So just to kind of summarize, I'll just categorize them into two categories. One is just answering the questions at hand, and then the second category will be some of the additional feedback that we received. So first and foremost, in terms of locations, I think generally there's a consensus that the locations are generally good in terms of enhancements for the mid-block crosswalks. Definitely a preference of raised crosswalks at least for the long blocks, for the long stretches, for the purpose of being able to serve as a traffic calming measure as a secondary effect, in addition to enhancing those crosswalks. And then where possible, then defer to lighted crosswalks. And then in terms of the the bus stop layout design, there's definitely a consensus amongst the commissioners that spoke that they prefer the pull-out option. So certainly, definitely noted that as well. And then in terms of public service sharing, in addition to the sort of the Uber and the Lyft, definitely a future conversation to be continued as well. So recognize that. So that would be kind of the first summary. Those are the questions that staff is looking for feedback. The second category, I think we got some really good feedback. So I'm going to go through them real quickly to make sure I highlight the ones that are here. So I think first and foremost, recognizing that wherever and whenever possible at the intersection level, we want crosswalks all around. So the one that was mentioned was that fourth crossing at Choco and Constitution, amongst all the other ones, of course. The other one that was mentioned was school traffic. So recognizing that even though Thai Academy is currently the only school in the area, but recognizing that there are obviously residential developments, which means there might be kids going to other schools, which means there will be school buses around this area. Definitely a good feedback. So we made a note of that. And then some of the other areas of concern that we want to pay attention to in the future. One would be the crossing, the Paseo connecting Choco and Jefferson, particularly the exit at Jefferson. We want to make sure that in the future we address that properly. Let's see. And then I think I answered the Jefferson and Chrysler question already. And then there was a comment about one of the mid-block crosswalks between two driveways. Definitely a good feedback, something we'll take into account when we are ready to do the actual design to make sure that that is indeed the ideal location going forward. So definitely recognize that and we'll note that for future reference. So one comment about paying attention, so we want to potentially examine the bend along Independence near the 101 interchange for potentially access around the area. So we noted that just to make sure that we take that into consideration and pay extra attention to the area once the project goes in. So definitely noted that as well. Of course, the U-turn will be something that we'll examine and potentially follow up with the commission. And with that, I believe I have captured all the sort of unique feedbacks. Please do let me know if I miss anything.
And I will have one last question that occurred to me, but did any other commissioners have any refinements for what Kevin has summarized? Commissioner Cole.
Kevin, I thought that Katie mentioned this issue of the Paseo between Choco and Jefferson, Choco.
Yes.
That issue of like when it empties out on Jefferson, is that kind of the right spot or is that safe? Is that right, Katie?
Yeah, he got that. He got that.
Oh, you got that? Oh, sorry, I missed that. Well, then the other, gosh, I'm sorry. Then I'm going to say with another, I hope I didn't miss this too, but this is really not a major thing, but I'd just be curious, Kevin, as to your armchair opinion around whether it does make sense to put a crosswalk between two driveways like that on either side of streets.
Right. Yeah. I would say, generally speaking, this is, just from a snapshot perspective, definitely not necessarily the ideal location. Although with this particular, I guess, area in mind, there are limited locations where we can fit that crosswalk, assuming we want a crosswalk in the first place, of course. For example, we cannot put that in between the two Paseos because the 111 to 155 Constitution Drive side, there's actually a pole out right in front of the Paseo. So we will not be able to have that. Of course, we can kind of put that near the other side of the driveway as well. And I definitely recognize what you mentioned, which is kind of the tendency of drivers when they're trying to make a right, looking left, not necessarily looking right. So those will be we will definitely take that into consideration whenever the appropriate time is for this crosswalk. But definitely a good feedback.
Thank you.
All right. That is a tension because it's also a really, really long straightaway. So balancing the driveway safety issues with if it's too long, people are going to cross the street anyway. So thank you to staff for looking into how best to balance those challenges. The kind of related or unrelated last question I have is, in all the amenities here, are there any like little parks here yet other than like crossing the street and getting on the Bay Trail, which is a big park?
To date, my understanding is I think there's a little Paseo area, again, that 110, 155. I believe that one was open at some point. It's definitely completely built. And I believe it was open at some point. That would probably be the only one that is currently out there that I am aware of. Menlo Porto and Uptown, they are both under construction. So those Paseos have not yet been constructed.
Okay, because when this comes back to City Council and they're like also thinking about amenities for the area, which I think may not be a finished conversation, that's a piece of feedback that occurs to me in looking at this area.
Definitely. And I just want to take this opportunity to also make a correction on a statement that I said a little bit earlier. My understanding is that the child care is no longer on the table, but the space is there for a future tenant to operate business.
Great. Well, thank you very much to staff for working on this and a really much improved systematic plan for a place that people can walk and bike and use transit with multiple different buildings for different uses and purposes. Thank you very much. We'll go back to the agenda and wait for my browser window to catch up. The staff have everything that they need from us so that we can move on. All right, so want to move on to, it doesn't seem like we need any motions on this. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have everything we need. Thank you. Yep.
All right, well, then we are moving on to informational items F, which are transmitted to the commission in staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the commission. Informational items are not action items. However, a commissioner, city council staff member, or member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. This is F1, updates on major project status. Does staff have any updates on major projects in this item?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. So I wanted to update the commission on a few things that are going on in the city. So first and foremost, the quiet zone study, we do anticipate to release the request for proposal within the next couple of weeks or so. So definitely excited about that one. Also, we have selected a consultant to move the El Camino Real Pedestrian Crossing project forward. So if you recall, this is a project that is looking to add that missing crosswalk. Speaking of providing crosswalks at our locations, so this would be along El Camino at Encino, Ravenswood, and Robo. So definitely excited about that one as well. Also, we finally have a date for our first community meeting for the Middle Avenue Complete Streets project. It is tentatively set for Thursday, March the 3rd at 6 p.m. So that's the time and the date. We're currently still exploring the venue, whether or not it should be a virtual meeting or maybe a hybrid or a combination of both. So that's to be determined at this point, given the COVID situation. So definitely want to stay tuned for that one. Also, for those of you that are interested, the ballers along New Bridge, at the last meeting I had mentioned that they are anticipated to be removed. I now have a tentative date, which would be tentative time, which would be the end of this month. So definitely excited to have that one moving forward. Finally, there's two things I wanted to mention. One is the Ravenswood resurfacing project. I think for the new commissioners might not be too familiar with this, but this is a project where we are resurfacing. Initially, the scope was to resurface Ravenswood between Elma, so right after the train track, all the way to Middlefield. And as a result of that, there was a project that came to the commission with some bike lane improvements. Since then, as many of you know, SRI have come in with an application for their development on Ravenswood in between Laurel and Middlefield. And as a result of that, staff has decided to shift the focus for that particular stretch. So essentially, for Ravenswood between Laurel and Middlefield, we're going to take that off the table for the time being and focus that resource on the other side of Ravenswood, which means we're talking about El Camino to Elma. So definitely a good opportunity for us to re-examine the striping along the area as well. So this will be definitely a good opportunity for the transportation team to look at that area a little bit closer. And with that, I do want to conclude by pitching an idea that I'm looking for the commission. So for some feedback, as you know, we currently have a 9-member body. We do have 2 members that are terming out by April. We have our Chair Levin and Commissioner Lee, who both will be terming out. As some of you know, our city commission is typically consists of a 7-member body. the Complete Street Commission is a bit unique. We have a 9-member body because we are a merger of the former Transportation Commission and the Bicycle Commission. So one of the things that I wanted to get some feedback from the commission is whether or not there's a desire to, for this commission to become a 7-member body, given that we have 2 commissioners that are terming out, or if there's a desire to remain 9 members. So that would be something that I'll be interested in, maybe getting some feedback from the commission. Doesn't have to be now, but I just wanted to pitch that idea out there. And then maybe that will be a topic of discussion for our March meeting. And of course, one other commission related business would be, since our chair is terming out in April, we do have to select a new chair and vice chair a little bit earlier than our typical time frame. I think generally we do that in April, but given the situation we're in, we would likely do that in March. I'm sorry, we typically select in May, but for this year we're going to do it in April, given the time frame. So with that, I will conclude my announcements and update. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Do any other commissioners have anything to share or ask? Let's see. Commissioner Seabrian.
So in share or ask, is this, I guess I'm just going to ask and you'll tell me. I should have asked it at another time. The question has come up to me from some residents in Belhaven about streetlights. And I was unsure. It seems like a complicated thing to get streetlights replaced. And so I didn't realize that. And I said that I didn't know quite where it would fit. But there's some concern. I know I brought up before, there's one intersection by the playground, Belhaven School, that is particularly dark at night. But they have mentioned that there are some strips of streets where streetlights are out, but then you have to apparently label and call. And so I just wanted to alert you, there's a streetlight issue in Belhaven. Is that where I would put it?
Yeah, well, Commissioner Cyprian, thank you for bringing that to our attention. So we can definitely follow up with you offline to make sure that they are addressed as quickly as possible. If it's simply a streetlight malfunctioning, I think we can definitely have our contractor go out there and do the repair as necessary. If the topic is on whether or not new streetlights are needed, then obviously we'll have to have that conversation. It's a little bit more involved, obviously, but it's definitely something that if you heard any feedback from residents about this particular area needing more lights, we definitely want to hear that from you and make sure that we address that as soon as possible.
Great.
So maybe we can chat offline just to make sure we get the correct locations.
Commissioner Bruzy.
Yeah, can we get an update on Ringwood? There was going to be a Ringwood task force or something like that. And originally there was conversation about somebody from Complete Streets being on the task force. What's the latest? Because we've had different Complete Streets commissioners have had experiences on Ringwood recently that make them interested, and there's sort of a safe routes to school overlay. And I just want to make sure we're squaring our stuff with Brown Act and that we're, yeah.
I believe our Assistant Public Works Director, Hugh Louch, is going to take that one. So.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. Yeah, so council approved the Coleman Ringwood study that's about to start is really just launching, and it's led by the county, and we're an active participant in it. So council approved, I think at the first January meeting, the funding for that. So we are starting to move forward. We're coordinating with them. And as part of that, as you said, we will have a community advisory committee, and that advisory committee will we talked about involving somebody from this group as part of that committee. So we do want to make sure that we get that going. I do have the sort of notes about who is interested, and I think I remember the 2 folks, but we can confirm that and make sure we get the right folks involved in that. We anticipate sort of early, probably in 2 to 3 months, I think there'll be official sort of public outreach. that starts for that study. And so that'll be another opportunity for, of course, anybody, all of you and many others to participate if you're interested. I mean, if there are particular things that you're seeing in the short term that you want to share, obviously we're always interested in hearing that, and can also, we have a great conduit to the folks at the county, can make sure we're passing, because Ringwood is technically all county roads. We can make sure we're passing that along to them as well. So,
Well, I had a couple of questions on that, actually. So I had originally said I was interested in this, and it's a road I bike on every single day because I live at the corner of Ringwood and Bay. And I realized, oh, actually, my living at the corner of Ringwood and Bay might actually require me to recuse myself from anything that comes before the commission. So I guess maybe I was going to say I probably shouldn't, if that's if owning a home close to Ringwood is a barrier to participation, then I should be transparent about that and let somebody else have that spot.
I'm not 100% sure. I don't think that this is a debate that we have to have still, but I don't know that we're going to set up the community advisory committee as a Brown Act body, so it may not have the same kind of as a formal commission would. I think the intent is more to be sort of purely advisory, no motions necessarily taken.
It's not going to come to us because it's not Menlo Park, right? So
the study will come to you before. I mean, it'll come to you probably multiple times over the course of the study, and it will also, when it gets adopted, we'll want the Complete Streets Commission to say you support it. So at that moment, I guess we can discuss whether or not you would need to recuse yourself, but that's a long way off. So.
The one more question I had was, I think I remember in the Transportation Master Plan, which curiously seems to be a broken link on our beta website right now. I can't find it.
It is.
Okay, sorry. So I can't confirm this, but I think I remember that there was a traffic signal that we had tentatively put in the TMP for the Bay Ringwood intersection. And I wanted to ask.
I don't know that off the top of my head, but it's something we can look into.
And
Kevin, you may know.
It's a pop quiz, Hugh.
I don't remember every project.
700 page. Sorry. Okay, so we can talk more about that later. When would be an appropriate time for us to tell you observations about Ringwood? Not now, later?
I mean, I think it might be better offline just to circle up on that, if that's okay. Yeah, just feel free to shoot an email to me. It's fine.
Okay. Thanks.
Or if you want to meet.
And just to confirm, Commissioner Cruz is correct. Part of one project in the TMP is the signalization of that location, plus a bit of a reconfiguration for that leg that goes up to Ringwood and the other street as well. So it is project number 53 if you folks are interested.
Kevin wins the pop quiz of the Transportation Master Plan.
Always,
I get second place.
Always.
Hugh, you got to catch up.
All right. So speaking of the Transportation Master Plan, does staff have any information about when City Council goal setting meetings are?
That one's for me too. So my understanding is that there is not enough, it's not scheduled yet, and we don't have a specific date. So sorry about that, but that there has been discussion about it. And I think with the changeover of city manager and one thing and another, that sort of put some additional delay. But I don't know if it'll be this month, but I think maybe by next month. But as soon as we have that information, we can always email it out.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Katie is at a current hand. Okay, any comments from members of the public on this item? I am not seeing any. So moving back to the agenda, to committee and subcommittee reports, where see on like there's a little bit of kind of process confusion about the climate action plan subcommittee, where the thing that we were going to do was different from what the city council priority summary said we were doing. So this group didn't meet, but there was a thing that was proposed to be under the multimodal, wait a second, hang on, maybe, sorry, maybe I have an answer to my question. Yeah, I have an answer to my question, never mind. So the city council priority summary described coming up with climate metrics as something that G3, the multimodal metrics subcommittee, was doing. But since the multimodal metrics subcommittee has room, then it, from a Brown Act perspective, does not matter. And there was a question about the climate related metrics that I had asked of Hugh that we will answer and address on G3. So hold a thought on till we get to G3. For downtown, unless Commissioner Lee has anything to add on that. Nope. On downtown access and parking, any updates from that subcommittee? Nope. Okay. Multimodal metrics. There was some correspondence between the subcommittee members and staff, where the last bit of the correspondence was suggesting a meeting between that group and you. So that seems like something that would be good to get scheduled, and because the conversation included the climate related metrics too, it would be good to invite Commissioner Lee there, and then we can do both of the things and schedule for it. Katie or Brian, do you have anything, or Hugh, do you have anything to add to that update?
No.
All right, the one thing that I would add to that update is that I'm also on the MTC Policy Advisory Council that got an update on the regional active transportation plan, and they are they're doing some good things in terms of saying that projects that get MTC funding or MTC recommended funding must contain complete streets improvements, and not only must consider complete streets improvements. And I also had some questions for MTC about how they're using metrics for that major program, and anything I hear back, and staff was going to reply to me separately on that, and I will forward that information on to the subcommittee, because it seems like using whatever it is that they're doing could be helpful. Let's see, G4 multimodal subcommittee, any updates on transportation demand management or transit or other regional items?
I feel like you might want to mention that Senator Josh Becker is working on a bill to advance the work that you've been doing.
Yes, that is in fact the case, and it's SB 917. It is a bill to set deadlines to advance the transformation action plan, which was approved by MTC over the summer, and that includes projects including fare integration, creating a connected network plan for the region, as well as next steps on wayfinding and real-time transit data. This is actually something that, as a supporter of seamless transit principles, this city may consider supporting the bill. And I guess what I can do there is to send the relevant information to staff and get a little bit of staff judgment about whether this might be a reasonable thing for the city. And if staff thinks it is, then I can present at an upcoming meeting. Is this a reasonable time to get feedback from the commission about like whether we should do it? I know that there's some city council issues about like when we do and don't want to, as a city, support bills. So
I have some thoughts
that
I was going to express. I don't know, which is that I'm just looking at our subcommittee list, and I'm looking at the fact that you and Commissioner Lee are terming out. And I'm looking at the number of meetings we have left. And I don't know what's feasible or reasonable. I think we should probably be looking at what you two have been uniquely covering that needs to get covered by other people. And I don't know whether we're going to have time in the next 2 meetings, which would be when it would be, to work on this with you on the committee, on the commission, although, there might be other ways to do this. So just wanted to, just realized that's coming up really soon.
Okay, so there are many other cities where I have supported this and related items with my nonprofit hat, not serving on the commission, but delivering presentations, answering questions, and so this is something that can be supported whether I'm on the commission or not at the time. Commissioner Cole.
First of all, thank you for saying that. That's very generous of you. And also congratulations on getting this moving.
Well, I mean, given that we have also supported the goal of having a seamlessly integrated transit system, congratulations to all of us, because this is something that this region has been trying to do for many decades. I was looking at MTC's slide about this topic, and there are waves of initiatives going back to the 70s. And so there's been forward motion in recent years. And so, kudos to everyone, including the city of Menlo Park, for helping to inch things forward and let us make more progress. So yes, that is a relevant update for this topic. Let's see, any Commissioner Cole?
Sorry, I will lower my hand.
Okay. Moving on to G5, Safe Routes to School Subcommittee. Any updates from Safe Routes to School?
I don't think there was anything major that we as a subcommittee have talked about. Commissioner Lee has been attending meetings about trainings at Hillview and places like that, and she may have something she wants to say, but nothing huge.
Through the chair, if I may also maybe jump in, I did receive a bit of information today that might be a good update for the commission here.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi just blew up right at that moment.
I wondered why you were so still.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Commissioner Lee looks like she might have fallen asleep.
So sorry. Is it okay if I just continue my item really quickly? So anyway, we have a draft of bike education for 6th graders who are coming to Hillview, and the parent volunteer who is committed to doing this is incredibly detailed and conscientious, and I think it's going to be spectacular when it is done. I hope that our hope is that we bring it to the Safe Routes to School Subcommittee at some point, so you guys can also take a look at it. If anybody else is like incredibly passionate about bike education with kids and wants to be involved in some way, just reach out to me offline.
Thanks, Lydia.
And then I just add to that particular update is that, so this is hot off the press. We do have a date for the the Safe Route to School program will be hosting a walk audit for the Upper Laurel School. So this is going to be on Wednesday, February 16. Literally just got that information not too long ago today. So we'll be distributing that officially to the commission and everyone else that might be interested. So, but for your information, February 16 on Wednesday, it will be at 2:30. The time will be 2:30, and I believe the meeting location will be obviously somewhere around the Upper Laurel School. So I'll make sure to forward that information to the commission after the meeting.
Hey, Kevin, is that around the time when when dismissal is happening? So we'll get to see all the kids moving around? Or is Wednesday an early dismissal day?
I do not know the information, so I apologize.
I'm sure somebody does.
Thursday is early dismissal day.
Thank you.
It's planned for pre to through dismissal so we can observe the activity of kids departing.
I was going to suggest that we consider doing something similar on Middle Avenue in anticipation of the public outreach, because Middle Avenue looks really different during school commute hours than it does during non-school commute hours. It's one of those Coleman type roads that can be kind of mellow and then really not. So I hope that, we can talk about it more offline, but along the theme of safe routes, that's going to be another place we should probably just witness so we can see what's really happening there.
What a good idea. Commissioner Cole?
Thank you. I really agree with that middle. And if that meeting's on March 3rd, maybe we connect this week about it to see if we can set that up, because we'd have to move pretty quickly. And I'd be happy to participate. Or
there's also ski week coming up, or
right, the week of the 21st.
As the plebes call it, winter break.
Yeah, so we'd really have to do this like, let's see, March 3rd is a Thursday. So like February 28th, whatever that Monday is, right?
That last February 20-ish week is the week when the kids are out of school, I think. Am I wrong about that?
Oh, I know. I think it's President's Day weekend. The 20th.
You would need to do it the 28th, or you would need to do it next week if you want to actually see children going to school. Yeah. And on the 28th, it's kind of a it'll be light because not everybody feels compelled to come back right on time.
When was the Laurel one, Kevin?
16th.
So this next week.
February 16th. Yeah.
Is it even not possible to do 2 in 1 week, to do middle next week?
It's probably going to be difficult to pull off. I will say that with middle, we do have the opportunity to even do it after the meeting as well, because given that this is going to be the first meeting for that project, and also if we want to do an audit for middle, I think there'll be plenty of opportunity to do that after the meeting. Actually.
Okay. Well, before Katie mentioned middle, I was going to mention Santa Cruz, because I know when I talked to you and Hugh earlier in the year, there were just so many near incidents on Santa Cruz. It was just getting kind of mind-boggling. I mean, I think I made this statement at the time to you all, but like, it's amazing to me when I see kids riding down Santa Cruz, how safe they feel. You know what I mean? They just look like, no problem, I'm just cruising down, and you're like, oh my God, you're like, 30 inches from like a speeding car. But I do think Santa Cruz is an issue too. So I know that this takes staff time and obviously Hugh's time and everything else, and to do the, what did you call them? Walkthroughs? What were they called?
Oh, we call them walk audits.
Walk audits. Okay.
Right. And I think we did one for Hillview not that long ago. But if you're talking about other stretches of Santa Cruz, we can certainly take that into consideration as well.
I guess it feels like, because we're approaching the end of the school year, we really have sort of April and May or March left to maybe try to, if it's even possible to do middle and, Santa Cruz, but that would be ideal, I think, because I think it's super important.
We are trying to schedule some other schools for this year, sort of a lot of it is also coordinating with the schools themselves to make sure we have the ability for them to,
Yeah.
figure out a time that works for them and one thing and another. So
No, of course, yeah.
but that
Okay,
is the
but-
plan, is to try to do that. And as Kevin said, we were at Hillview at sort of in December and did a walkout, and Lydia participated in that as well. So we
Oh,
did,
okay.
and we do have some findings. Now, the one thing I'll say about that that's sort of unique is that the walkouts tend to be very focused around the school, like within a few blocks of the school. And, as staff, we also go out regularly, and anytime we hear about an issue, and do some observation sort of independently on our own, we're always happy to have company on those things. So if there are particular areas or particular times a day, just let us know,
Okay.
and we can fit those things in where we can do some observation.
Okay, I'll give that some thought and present my, focused thoughts around that. I do want to say one thing just off the bat that I would like to raise, so Kevin, you are aware of it, is that since I'm working from home, I'm much more the observer of Santa Cruz, but there is a lot of lack of enforcement of like vans and, contractors and whatnot, parking in bike lanes during the day. And for the first time since I've lived here, I actually called the police yesterday and I said, you have got to tell these two vans that can easily be parking in a driveway to get out of there before 3 o'clock when the school lets out or whatnot. Because it's really hazardous. I mean, if they're taking up the whole bike lane, then kids are clearly going into the driving lane. And I don't know how that's really conscionable or we can permit that for happening. So I wish there were more enforcement of that. I've never seen a police officer pull over and tell someone to get out of the bike lane. There's been parking there for hours. I've never seen it. So.
Yeah, thank you very much for making that note. We'll make sure to
Okay.
relay that information. Yeah, to
Okay.
the appropriate departments.
Cool, great. Thank you for a welcome, robust update on Safe Routes to School. Moving on to G6 and Transformation Master Plan Implementation Subcommittee. I think that this subcommittee should meet before the City Council goal setting, and it would be great if we could have some staff support to get some feedback about, given staffing and the state of progress of things, like what could be like expected to be happening based on what was previously slated to be happening. And if we had suggestions to be made, what would be within the realm of logical possibility versus what would be like outside the laws of physics. So is that Hugh, is that something that you would do? Like which staff member should we reach out to support that conversation, and would it be appropriate to do so?
Yeah, I think it's fine to do so. Absolutely. I think essentially what you're asking is sort of an overall view on what our workload looks like and what things are happening, and then how other new things might relate to that. If that's what I'm hearing you say. So yeah, I'd probably be the right person to do that, because I get to see a little bit of everything.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. Anybody else on that subcommittee have, like, does that sound like a reasonable strategy?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. And I think we're also due to check in with you one last time on multimodal metrics. Maybe we can do those at the same time.
All right, except for we're not
over. Yeah.
Well, we can back to back it, but there's on the metrics. Commissioner Lee wanted to weigh in on the climate metrics, so we can just do it back to back so as not to violate the Brown Act.
Perfect. Okay.
All right, so that was G6. G7, any update from Zero Emissions Subcommittee, Commissioner Jensen?
So we did not meet this month, and we haven't made a lot of progress, so not a ton to report on right now. But in lieu of your departure, Commissioner Levin, I'd love to get more context from you on some of the e-bike stuff in particular. I know we had tossed around the idea of doing an e-bike pilot, And I'd love to understand that better and what progress has been made there so that Commissioner Cromie and I can kind of take it from there and keep going even after your departure from the committee.
Mayor Nash just had an update at City Council last night about an e-bike thing.
Oh, I missed this entirely. I was not paying attention to that.
I would suggest talking with Mayor Nash.
If I may, through the chair, another kind of update. So there's she was talking about kind of a county-wide e-bike subsidy program. And then I think folks know, but if you don't know, in the last state budget, there was $10 million for a statewide e-bike subsidy program that the Air Resources Board is in the middle of putting together right now, and is going to be shortly hiring some organization or a set of organizations to distribute across the state. And that's meant to be sort of a first phase thing. So there's quite a lot of activity going on, and I'm happy to I can send you some links and information about what they're doing. They're just standing that program up, but it is orders of magnitude larger, of course, than what's being done elsewhere, which is great, and something that CalBike, as an advocacy organization, has been fighting for a long time. The sort of, the program that sort of gets people into cleaner cars is sort of meant to be a parallel to that. So even cleaner vehicles.
Cool. Yeah, any additional context you can provide there would be much appreciated.
And just so that we don't have to do more follow-up, Commissioner Johnson, can you clarify what the question that you have to ask of me? Because I'm not sure I know that much about electric bikes. So what was the question that you wanted to have, so I can either say that I can talk about it offline or direct it to somebody else that knows more than me?
Sure. Yeah. In my previous conversations with John, he had suggested that Evan Golden handled most of the e-bike stuff previously. And then he said he knew he had some documents at the time, but he wasn't sure if he had access to them. And he suggested you potentially would have access to that because Evan's not around anymore. So
if it was something that was through the commission, then staff probably has it, and I can also get you access to actually Evan Golden. So
oh, awesome.
So if you want to offline send me an email and I will get you contact information for Evan Golden, and that will solve that.
Perfect.
All right.
That sounds great.
Cool. Having gone through our subcommittees, are there any members of the public who have any comments on the subcommittee reports? Please raise your hand. If not, I do not see any comments. So moving on to adjournment to our meeting next month. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Good
Bye,
night,
everyone.
everyone.
Much.
Bye.